Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the architecture that powers modern data engineering. Imagine you've got a dataset that is just vastly too massive for one single machine's memory, right? And you hand it over to a cluster of hundreds of everyday ordinary machines. Minutes later, boom, you get a perfectly correct answer. This heavy lifting is happening in parallel across all of those machines, and get this, it even automatically recovers if a few of them happen to crash along the way. So let's go deep under the hood today and see exactly how Apache Spark's incredible architecture pulls this off.
Okay, to really appreciate Spark, let's contrast it with its famous predecessor, Hadoop MapReduce. Think about the heavyweights that were just dragging MapReduce down. Between literally every processing step, it had to write intermediate results all the way back out to disk. Now, for simple one-and-done tasks, totally fine. But for iterative algorithms, like those intense machine learning training loops, this constant heavy disk writing and reading created an absolutely massive overhead. So Spark's founding insight was actually super simple, but totally transformative. Keep your data in memory across processing steps whenever you possibly can, and only touch that slow disk when you truly absolutely have to.
And the result of avoiding all that disk I/O? Well, it made Spark dramatically faster. We're not just talking about a slight bump in efficiency here. We are talking about workloads running 10 to 100 times faster in practice. It was an absolute game changer, a complete paradigm shift for the whole industry.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the in-memory revolution, then step inside the cluster hierarchy, look at resilience and data abstractions, explore the Catalyst Optimizer, break down jobs, stages, and tasks, and finally, wrap things up with some tuning and troubleshooting.
Section 1. The In-Memory Revolution.
Section 2. Inside the cluster hierarchy.
All right, so right at the center of our cluster hierarchy sits the driver. Now, the driver doesn't actually do the heavy lifting itself. Instead, it's the process running your actual application code, generating the game plan, and coordinating exactly how all that work gets distributed. The driver talks to a cluster manager. Think Yarn or Kubernetes. And the manager's sole job is to allocate the actual CPU and memory resources. Finally, the cluster manager launches executors. These are the worker processes spread across your entire cluster that actually crunch the data in parallel. What's brilliant here is that strict separation of concerns, right? Planning versus resource allocation versus execution. It's exactly what allows the very same code you wrote to scale from a quick local test on your laptop all the way up to a massive cluster spanning thousands of nodes.
Section 3. Resilience and Data Abstractions.
This brings us to Spark's absolute foundational data abstraction, the Resilient Distributed Dataset, or RDD. Pretty much everything else in Spark builds right on top of this concept. Let's unpack those words a bit. Distributed means the data is genuinely, physically split up into chunks, partitions, that live on different executors across multiple different machines. Dataset, well, that simply means a collection of data rows or records. But resilient, that is the genuinely clever part.
Let me show you exactly what makes it resilient. Instead of doing what you might expect, which is constantly replicating actual data across a bunch of machines, just in case one happens to crash, wasting huge amounts of storage and network bandwidth, Spark does something smarter. It tracks the lineage of your data. It basically records the exact sequence of transformations you applied to produce it. So if an executor node suddenly dies, Spark doesn't need to hunt down a backup copy. It simply replaced that recorded lineage from the original source data to recompute just the lost partition, completely from scratch, on a healthy executor. You literally only pay that computation cost if a failure actually happens.
Section 4. The Catalyst Optimizer.
Now, there is a very distinct divide in how Spark handles work. Operations fall into two entirely different camps. Transformations, like a map or filter, which just describe how you want to derive new data, and actions, like a count or collect, which actually trigger the computation to run. And because of this concept called lazy evaluation, Spark literally does absolutely nothing when you ask for a transformation. None of it. It just quietly builds up a plan. It waits until an action forces its hand to finally move. And it does this deliberately. Why? So it can optimize the entire big picture plan before it runs a single task.
And all that optimization, that happens inside the Catalyst Optimizer. When you're using modern Spark DataFrames, where Spark actually knows the schema of your data, Catalyst can automatically rewrite your query plan to be vastly more efficient. It is so cool.
It pushes filters up to run as early as possible, so you're processing way less data overall. It evaluates multiple physical plans, choosing between things like hash joins or broadcast joins just based on data statistics. And finally, it uses whole stage code generation to basically compile your logical query directly into highly efficient Java bytecode. Honestly, this right here is exactly why modern DataFrame-based code frequently outperforms carefully handwritten RDD code.
Section 5. Jobs, Stages, and Tasks. So, when you finally call that action we talked about, Spark creates a job. That job then gets broken down into stages. And within each of those stages, the work is sliced down into tasks. Tasks are the absolute smallest unit of execution here, and there is exactly one task for every single partition of your data. This is where the magic of actual parallel execution happens across your available CPU cores. And keep in mind, if you have too few partitions relative to your cores, while all your incredible computing power is just going to sit there idle. Now, the really crucial point is how Spark decides where one stage ends and the next one begins. That boundary is dictated entirely by what we call a shuffle. A shuffle happens when operations, like a group by for instance, require data that's currently sitting on totally different partitions to suddenly come together. Spark has to literally move that data across the network between executors, and guys, shuffles represent the absolute biggest performance cost in any Spark job because of all that heavy network and disk I/O, which is exactly why we use techniques like data bucketing in the real world to pre-organize data and try to avoid them altogether.
Section 6. Tuning and Troubleshooting. As you probably know, a huge share of performance problems in data engineering come down to memory management. Inside Spark, each executor divides its memory into execution memory. This is for active computations like those expensive shuffles and joins, and storage memory, which is just for data you've explicitly asked Spark to cache. Now, Spark uses a unified memory model, meaning these two regions can dynamically borrow space from each other on the fly. But if an executor genuinely runs out of available memory during a heavy computation, it doesn't just crash. Instead, it spills that intermediate data right to disk. It keeps the job running, sure, but at a massive performance cost since writing to disk is incredibly slow.
Let's anchor all these abstract concepts with a really concrete e-commerce example. Imagine we're calculating customer spending on a massive data set. First, the driver builds out the plan lazily. When you finally hit go and call an action, Catalyst kicks in. It takes your filter, say removing transactions under $100, and pushes it super early to shrink the dataset right off the bat. Then for a join with a really small customer table, Catalyst gets smart and chooses a broadcast join. It literally sends a copy of that small table to every single executor, completely avoiding an expensive shuffle. But for that final group by to calculate the actual spending, well, a shuffle is unavoidable there. So that creates a hard stage boundary, and tasks run in parallel to execute it. If a job like that is crawling along, here are your actionable golden tips for troubleshooting. Always start by checking out the Spark UI. You are specifically hunting for two main culprits. First, stages with unusually long shuffle read or write times, which points to massive data movement across the network. And second, task skew. Task skew is incredibly common. It's when most of your tasks finish in a few seconds, but a handful just take absolutely forever. That almost always means you've got uneven data distribution across your partitions. Honestly, expensive shuffles and task skew account for the vast majority of real-world production issues you are going to encounter.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with one singular thought that really defines Spark's entire architectural purpose. When you strip away all the stages, the executors, and the APIs, Spark exists to answer this one beautiful question. How do you take a computation, split it across many machines, keep as much of it in memory as possible, and gracefully recover when pieces inevitably fail? It is a truly profound engineering challenge, and Spark solves it brilliantly. But with AI models and data volumes growing exponentially every single day, it begs the question, what is the next major paradigm shift beyond in-memory processing going to look like? Thanks for diving into this with me, and stay curious.